All Hit Radio.
All right, you're listening to All Hit Radio, and it's 53 degrees. And right now on our All Request line, I've got Mike Ledgerwood on the phone. Hey, babe, what would you like to hear?
We are observing your Earth.
Listen, Mike, I'm sorry, babe, but we can't...
And we'd like to make...
I'm sorry, Mike, there's...
contact with you.
Collision course. On Revolution Radio.
We're about to begin a journey through the cosmos. We'll encounter galaxies and suns and planets, how the cosmos has shaped our evolution. We are a way for the cosmos to know itself.
Right now, Francis.
Good evening, everyone. It's Francis. The Asteroid 2005 YU55 is coming for a close approach November 8th and November 9th to the Earth on the 8th and the Moon on the 9th. And Richard's going to come on because there's been a lot of talk about it and tell us what he thinks. Hi, Richard.
I'm here.
I want you to go ahead, and you know what I'm going to ask you, just so we can get it out there, and we've got a limited amount of time. Can you summarize, give me 10, 15-minute summary, and then I'm going to give you 3 questions about what's going on with YU55.
Okay, well, I can do it in 3.
Thank you.
A, there's an amazing thing about to happen, maybe. If it happens the way we have projected based on our calculations and the inside sources I talked about last week, it's going to blow everybody's mind. It's going to be the most spectacular light show in your lifetime, and it's going to basically change a lot of things in society, politically, which are all in place waiting for the game changer, as I've called this. So let me start at the beginning. There is an object roughly 1,300 feet across, 400 meters, called YU55, billed by NASA as an asteroid. Although when I was looking at the Arecibo radar images tonight, I did some tweaking, and this darn thing does not look like any asteroid I've ever seen. For one thing, it's spherical.
Sorry, caller 666. Can you turn off your radio, please?
Anyway, this object is 1,300 feet across. They're calling it in the mainstream media now a aircraft carrier-sized object, which is really like, huh? Because, first of all, it's bigger than any aircraft carrier I know, although I may have missed, like the Nimitz or something, or the Truman. But to call it that implies it's a vehicle. See how these memes work? It's like they're getting people used to the idea vehicle as opposed to chunk of rock. They could have said Gibraltar-sized, okay? But they're calling it aircraft carrier size. You got to watch these little bouncing balls. Next thing is the radar imagery I'm looking at. It don't look like no asteroid I've ever seen. In fact, it looks like something out of Star Wars. And what I'm going to do on my Facebook page tonight after the meeting that I have to run away from in about half an hour, I will post the radar image which we have cleaned up, taken out the noise, taken out the bit hits, taken out some other stuff, and you will all see this thing looks really weird, and it's spherical, which nothing that small, accreting under self-gravitation, should possibly be. It should be a splinter. We all saw Deep Impact. We all saw Armageddon. Asteroids are splinters, right? Tumbling end over end, ominously in space. Not this guy. Oh, and it rotates very, very slowly. Initially, when JPL posted this data back in June, when it started to make a big deal of this thing flying by on the 8th and 9th of November, they had a rotational period approximately 20 hours, which, of course, I had a source at JPL tell me was really 19.5 hours, the infamous familiar hyperdimensional number of the physics. Well, if you go to the JPL website now, they've changed the rotation period to 18 hours. This radar, which is Arecibo, 1,000-foot dish, can chirp to within, microseconds. You mean to tell me that they can't tell the difference between an object rotating in 20 hours and 18 hours? That's a 2-hour time difference, and they're measuring rotation speeds on the order of millimeters per second, which translates for an object 1,300 feet across to X number of hours. No, they're lying again. But if you read the JPL exhaustive data out of Goldstone for all the procedures they're going to undertake in terms of getting data and getting much better imagery, et cetera, buried down there in the fine print, which we posted several times on our Facebook page, both the fan page and our friends page, they have a reflectivity given. When you bounce a radar signal off an object, it absorbs some energy and reflects the rest, right? Well, guess how much energy YU55 is supposed to be reflecting? Approximately 20%. In other words, they've hidden their ritualistic 19.5 under the reflectivity. These guys cannot get over their rituals. They have to do this by the ritual. And there's so many more numbers that I could bore everyone with, but I will not. So what's going to happen? Well, this is Friday night at about 9:30 this morning, Pacific time, Pacific Daylight Time. The Goldstone, which is the only one of 2 radar facilities on the planet that can reach out millions of miles into space and ping a signal off this approaching object, which is still millions of miles away, approaching at like 10 miles per second. They started pinging, we are told, this morning at 9:30 a.m. Actually, that's another lie. My inside sources tell me they've been pinging this thing for the last 2 weeks, which is the basis of some of the information I'm going to update you about in a few minutes. Anyway, publicly, for all the science writers, all the networks, all the people at the New York Times, CBS, CNN, whatever, they officially started pinging radar signals off this thing this morning. Now, here's where it gets interesting. When they were doing it in secret, they obviously could hide the trajectory. If they're doing it now quasi-publicly, the lid is going to come off because somebody is going to Twitter or make a phone call or post on Facebook that this thing, if our model is correct, and I want to absolutely emphasize that what I'm laying out here is a scenario, it's not a fact yet because we don't have the absolute data yet. It's a scenario. But the scenario says that long about September 11th, a month and a half ago, this thing should have changed course by an interaction with so-called comet Elenine, which also reached perihelion on September 11th and reached out in this model with this torsion field effect we've discussed many times and just tweaked just a little bit the trajectory of YU55. That in turn, instead of sending it in its normal calculated trajectory past us on the evening of November 8th at 200,000 miles, and about 8 hours later past the moon at about 160,000 miles, that little tweak done on September 11th changed the course in our model so that now YU55 will cross above the Earth at about sunset local time at about 50,000 miles. And I hear the gasps now. Oh, my God, it's only 50. Well, really, come on. It can't jump sideways. In this business, a miss is as good as a mile. And believe me, they're going to have an exquisite radar track, and they will know down to within meters where this thing is going to be. That's only about twice as far away or high up measured from the Earth's surface as the geosynchronous satellites move around the Earth in their orbits, the ones that, carry television and the ones that carry data for the stock market and the ones that are spy satellites for the DOD and the CIA and, are looking at signals from enemy nations for the NSA, et cetera. Those all orbit much lower at about 22,300 miles. So 50,000 miles is basically in cislunar space, and there's nothing to worry about here on Earth. I repeat, Our data, our intel now says there is no way this object is going to hit the Pacific Ocean, which is the side of the Earth facing it as it comes in to fly by. Now, how can we be absolutely 100%? I mean, there's nothing in life that's really ever 100%, but in this case, we're like 99.999% because we know what? Well, we know it's not going to hit the Pacific because President Barack Obama and most of the leadership of the Western Hemisphere, all the Asian Pacific nations fronting on the Pacific Rim, from South America to Australia to Asia to Japan, they're all gathering with Obama on the island of Oahu at 19.5 as this thing comes by next Tuesday night. And you really wouldn't put those folks there. The security people would scream and freak out and heads would roll and a few other body appendages if someone was deliberately placing all these heads of states and ministers and economic congressional people and all that in harm's way in the middle of a major tsunami, which would happen if this thing plunked down in the Pacific Ocean. In fact, as I reported last week, we know the U.S. Navy is conducting a Pacific-wide tsunami exercise in this same time frame, November 9th. And we know that they ran a simulation at Imperial College London looking at the effects of tsunamis, waves created by a potential YU55 impact, and it is a negatory. It is not going to happen. Now, what could happen? Well, 8 hours after this little thing flies by, 50,000 miles above the treetops, giving us a really good view against the stars that night, and Francis is going to talk momentarily about where we stand with our amateur worldwide YU55 network that we've been working to set up.
Yes, I am.
This thing could either impact the moon, which I'll get to momentarily in terms of effects, or, in the words of one of my sources, it could be a really close flyby, like just a couple of 100 miles above the moon's right-hand side in what would be a kind of a screaming left-hand turn, because the moon's gravity would kind of kink it around and it would move off in a somewhat really different azimuth direction from it approached. It cannot, by the way, as one of my people on Facebook asked, could this thing make a U-turn and come back toward the Earth? No, that is not possible, because it will be flying by the moon or into the moon at 10 miles per second. And the moon's gravity is so small that there's no way that it could yank it around and head it back toward a collision with the Earth. So any way you look at it, we are safe. Get out the popcorn, because in the uncertainties that I was reporting a week ago, the trajectory was not known well enough to know whether, even though it was going to miss the Earth, it would in fact miss the moon. Now I should be able to report, based on those same sources, whether it's going to hit or miss in terms of a lunar impact. I can't do that. Why? Because all my sources have gone to ground. Something really interesting happened after the first important leaks of data. Everything shut down. Radar site shut down, sources shut down, bulletin board shut down. Nobody is talking about this in the echelons that my folks, the ones I talk to, are privy to. It's like nothing was going to happen except NASA put out press releases, and they had a live net conference a 3 days ago on 11/1/11. Think of the numbers are important. And they basically are assuming this thing is going to fly by the way it was previously calculated to fly by, 200,000 miles away from Earth, 160,000 miles away from the moon, and then disappear into the solar system for another 1.22 years, in which time, when it comes back, the Earth will be nowhere near where it was before, and we don't have to worry about anything for hundreds of years in terms of a close approach. I believe we have figured out the political strategy, because at all costs, NASA must be kept in this whole scenario squeaky clean. They cannot admit to any prior knowledge of what this thing is going to do. So they have to pretend when they get their first radar data, which came in today, but we don't know what it is yet because the lid is on tight. They will, whenever they release it, I'm betting now it's going to be Monday, on the 7th, November 7th. 7 come 11. Remember, they love rituals. I'm betting they're going to say, oh my God, you'll never know what we just found. Something has tweaked this trajectory, and it's going to hit the moon. Again, that's a scenario. One of the key points that my intel source told me before he disappeared, clammed up, went to Pluto, wherever he's gone, was that for some reason, remember, on November 9th, the afternoon of the morning of the potential lunar impact, the FCC and FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, have gotten together to conduct a 3-minute broadcast test of every broadcast facility in North America for the first time in the history of the EBS system. And that will involve radio stations, television stations, but not the Internet, because they don't need to, as we'll explain in a minute if I have time. And by the way, I may be able to go a few minutes over, Francis, so don't sit there sweating bullets.
I am sweating, but I will not stop you.
Okay, we're almost done. So anyway, this thing is going to proceed the morning of the FEMA test in the afternoon at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, and I believe that has been set up since June 9th to basically give the president, sitting there in Oahu, surrounded by the leadership of the Western Hemisphere, a way to talk simultaneously through every radio and television station in the country to the population. And the reason they had to do it this way is that normally when the president says he wants time on a network or whatever, he has to request it. And there have been occasions in our past when television networks, because of ratings, have simply said, not on your life. We're going to proceed with our commercial money-making stuff. Mr. President, you can go take a long walk off a short pier. Well, the way they're getting around it this time is to, by law, because the stations have to conform to an EBS test by law, not a presidential address, but an EBS test, yes. So they have basically blocked out that time for what I think is going to be a calm and reassuring address from Hawaii with the president on the afternoon of the 9th of November saying, this amazing thing has happened. There's nothing to worry about. Do not panic. Go back to work. Go back to school. Go back to doing what you're doing, and stay tuned for interesting developments in 3 days. Now, what are those developments? Well, in 3 days, the debris that will be knocked off the moon in the creation of this 6-mile wide, 1 mile deep, those are approximate numbers, crater size, will fall under gravity from the moon to the Earth. Kind of the inverse of the Apollo project where the astronauts took 3 days to get to the moon. And it will create the most spectacular second light show you've ever seen in your lifetime, as the atmosphere lights up with trillions and trillions of little tiny meteoritic particles coming in at 25,000 miles per hour, 7 miles per second, and burning up in the high atmosphere. It's going to be extraordinary, and it will freak everybody out unless the president says there is no danger. So that's the scenario that we're looking at. And one final thing. There is a huge blueprint of the hyperdimensional physics all over this scenario, starting with the date when Elanine and YU55 did their little do-si-do, 16 million miles away from each other, each passing within an hour or so of closest approach to the sun back on September 11th. Because September 11th is exactly 111 days from the end of the calendar year. And 111 or 111111 or 11111 or any combination thereof is a mathematical code for 19.5, which is the physics. Over to you, Francis.
Thank you, Richard, for just being able to just cut that. I mean, you're able to just speak it all out, and that is wonderful that we can have someone come on and give us the lowdown. So, Richard, I'm going to ask you a couple questions.
Ask the questions.
Okay, thank you, Richard. From a friend.
You need to get more humor in your show.
I do. Honestly, I'm a little bit nervous tonight, Richard. I don't know why. So just, if you could bear with me, I'm sorry. Someone said it today. I'm down to earth.
So because nobody's here yet for the meeting.
Say, listen, if YU55 were to strike the moon, is there a possibility of it causing an electromagnetic pulse or EMP?
Excellent question. Boy, who sent that one in? Let's give him a big cigar.
That's Dr. Eisen, 1965.
Asimov?
I have no, it's his username.
Oh, well, that's his acronym. That's his handle. Okay. No, and here's the reason. Because the geometry is all wrong, for one thing. Number two, it's an impact, even though it's significant megatonnage, about 10,000 megatons, worst or best case scenario, depending on your point of view. It's so far away, 250,000 miles, and the pulse spreads out as an inverse square law function. So by the time the pulse gets to Earth, it's not like a nuclear weapon detonated in the stratosphere. It's damn weak, and it simply can't create the voltages. But just as a precaution, I would advise everyone that night, you could leave your TVs in. They're fine, but I would unplug your computers just in case, because those chips are kind of fragile, and for commercial, sales, they keep the price down by not hardening them at all. Bottom line, I don't think it's a problem. I've looked at the numbers really hard. I've had a couple of other people look at them, and we think that's a non-problem. A more significant problem, which we should pay attention to, are the secondaries, which are they're trillions of tiny spherules that will be formed in a vacuum when the debris cools, because this will create a huge explosion as YU55 buries itself under the lunar surface, and then the material blasts back up in the classic standard meteor impact crater scenario. The problem is there will be a few big chunks. Not a lot. Say again?
I'm sorry. I'm going to ask you a silly percentage question. In your head, what percentage have you put on it?
Of what?
On this scenario actually happening.
Honestly, I don't know, because we don't have the new radar data. The old data, the leaked data I got was, minus probability for Earth impact, plus probability for either lunar impact or close lunar swing by, but they didn't have the numbers to decide which was which, and then they pulled the plug, and I got no more inside data. So at the moment, we don't have any science to go by. All we have is a gut feeling. Now, let me tell you what my gut feeling is. The folks who set this up, and that's a whole show we should do. In fact, I actually did this at Awake and Aware. I discussed in 3 hours in my presentation at the Awake and Aware conference about a month ago in Irvine, the interesting mathematical linkage, the exquisite, unalterable linkage between alanine and YU55 in the numbers, in the physics. And I'll give you one set of numbers. September 11th is a big date for us because of New York, right?
Yes.
Francis?
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
So the way you calculate the probability is, okay, what are the odds that something else of significance is going to happen on exactly the same date? That's 1 chance in 365, which is the number of days in a year, 1 day out of the year, right? Times 1 chance in 365. That gives you 119,000 and change, I guess. Then times 1 in 365, because you add in YU55. That's 1 chance in 48 million. Francis, this is an accident.
Yeah,
that means it was designed. If it's designed, the only reason you'd make it a flyby is to scare the pants off a few insiders. Well, that makes no sense. The insiders already know this technology and those people exist. the people you want to communicate, the people you want to blow the doors off for, wide open in public, but there's a very busy cosmos with other people out there, and we're no longer isolated, and our keepers have kept us from knowing what's going on, is everybody on Earth who needs to be looking up and see this thing happen in real time. So if I was a betting man, which sometimes I am, I would bet, Francis, it's going to be the most spectacular impact in our lifetime, like Jupiter, except right next door, and you better all get a lot of popcorn because you're going to want to really enjoy this show.
And I've got a bunch of different people with telescopes. I contacted my contact at the Global Reniscope Network. Him and I are setting up a little schedule at the right time with one of the telescopes to take images of the asteroid. So if all the timing is correct, and if I'm taking the pictures at the right time, I'm going to end up with the asteroid and the moon somehow. But then again, I'm not too sure about that because I'm not sure.
Remember that we're not going to know optically.
Where it is. Right.
We're not going to know visually
right.
whether it's on the same trajectory as JPL is currently standing behind until after sunset that night.
Right.
On November 8th.
There is a lot of I have found out to all the listeners that this whole tracking asteroid YU55 is not the easiest thing in the world. Oh, Richard, you know what I did find today, though? There's a website called SLOOH, SLOOH.com. It's the camera on the world. They're doing 2 live broadcasts of asteroid YU55 on November 8th. So everyone, if they haven't seen the link, it's SLOOH, SLOOH.com. They're doing 2 live broadcasts. They're attempting to go after YU55. So there are going to be a lot of sources that I'm going to be putting forth over this weekend and coming up to the date about how you can either get involved with us who are taking pictures of that asteroid at that time and date so that we can all see what's going on. Richard,
now, the important thing is if people are glued to their computers to look at the flyby of Earth, they will not miss the impact on the moon. Because I'm telling everybody, don't you dare watch this on television or on your computer. Get outside. I don't care where you are in the northern and southern hemisphere of North and South America. Get outside. Look at this thing with your naked eyes, a pair of binoculars, a telescope. You will kick yourself forever if you're confined electronically to some cave, a darkened room watching a flickering TV screen. Because it needs to be seen in all its amazement, if it happens, with your own eyes. And then you'll see endless replays on television, on the net, on YouTube, so you're not going to miss anything. Earlier, 8 hours earlier, as it flies by, unless you're in a very dark area, it's going to be so dim, you're never going to see it at all. It's going to be even closer than the 200,000 miles. If it's at 50,000 miles, which it has to be for a lunar impact, it still is going to be 8th magnitude, which, as you know, is about, 16 times too dim to be seen with a naked eye under anything but really, really, really dark skies like we have here in New Mexico. So that part you can watch, streamed on the computer, tune into the right site. SLOOH is one. There'll be hours. Francis will have all the data. I'll be posting it on Facebook, on Enterprise. He'll be posting it. So you're not going to miss this. If you're listening to the show, you're not going to miss this. But do not watch the lunar impact on television because you will never forgive yourselves.
Richard, I have to ask, because this is, collision courses, and I have my certain opinions, I have to ask you a question, Richard. What if nothing happens?
Yeah. Well, wait a minute.
I mean, what if it just...
Hang on.
What if NASA's right and we're wrong or whatever?
Oh, hang on. Define nothing.
Okay. I appreciate the fact that it's flying close by and the trajectory to date shows it's close...
Define nothing.
Okay.
Nothing in my... Hang on.
No impact. A hit and a miss. A swing and a miss.
No, see, that's the wrong definition.
I know.
Nothing happening is, it's exactly in the sky where the ephemeris JPL is put out now. There has been zero course change. It flies by the Earth at sunset at 11:38 Greenwich Mean Time on the late evening of the 8th of November. and then 8 hours later it flies by the moon at 160,000 miles. That is my definition of nothing. If this thing has moved even by 1,000 miles or 10,000 miles in trajectory, something really huge has happened. It just may not be for everyone. You may have to bring a brain to the party. You may have to realize that asteroids cannot change course on their own, and someone has changed this course, meaning A, there's somebody out there, B, they have a physics that can change the orbit of a celestial object the size of an aircraft carrier without rockets, and B, or C, I forget where we are, politically, this was designed to shake up the powers that be on this planet by firing a warning shot across their bow, but in a way that the general community of Earth, 7 billion people, will go about their business and never, ever look up. So nothing happening has to be very carefully defined.
Right, and I do not define my things perfectly because I am far from being perfect, but just so that my opinion must be known in a sense that I don't necessarily believe, I think it's where it's supposed to be, Richard, because, and I'm going to tell you why. Because I would appreciate the interaction of Comet Elenin and YU55 if Comet Elenin had turned out to be a comet that would have been an extremely bright and robust comet, because there was a time where there was an alignment of the two objects and the sun. So, and in that case, and we're talking a very long distance in between.
So Newtonian. You're not thinking HD physics.
Well, no, I'm thinking your word. I'm using my wife as my foundation, and this is a girl who's going to have to. She thinks in a different plane. I would more easily go to the plane with you and be able to really play in those physics numbers.
Wait. In other words, you're telling me she needs a light show before she'll believe anything.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to mince words. You don't have to mince words. She's a very
spectacular thing to grab
woman.
her. She needs a spectacular thing that grabs her attention, right?
If this moon does it, I tell you what, you're number one astronomer on her list. If this moon event happens, she will.
What I'm giving you is the range of scenarios. We can't guarantee anything because we don't know who's writing the script or what their end objective is. You follow me?
I like to say that just for the. Because we have so many listeners, and there's different viewpoints on it. Like, listen, I'll tell you this week, I've had people approach me who they are not your best friend, Richard, and so I mean, there's all different sorts of viewpoints. So I just want to make it clear about myself, because sometimes I get lost in the discussions, and part of the reason why I have the show is that I do make myself clear. I can listen to every scenario in the world because I do bring a brain to it. And it doesn't affect me as it might affect some others. So that's the only reason why I wanted to make that statement. Now, I know it's 7:41 and you are already 11 minutes over. What you got more time?
Yeah, I got more time because the folks haven't shown up yet.
Okay.
You're lucking out. So
okay,
let me basically hit this on the head. I understand that there are a lot of people who want to play gotcha out there, and if they don't see anything spectacular smash into the moon, they're going to say, oh, Hoagland's wrong. But I'm telling you that the actual criteria where any sane person will look at this will be, did the trajectory move? Because if this is intended for a narrow audience of policy people, like the president, like the prime minister, like the Queen of England, like the Pope, like, the folks that actually know how to think, or at least
it could be intended. It could be intended for a wider audience, like all our listeners. Sometimes some people feel like that.
They have to bring a brain to the table and say, okay, the real criteria is, did that trajectory move? Are the coordinates of looking at it different that night than JPL is publishing now? And if it's moved, there's nothing that can move it except an intelligent force, an intelligent operator. Somebody out there kicked it, gave it a tweak, pulsed it with a tractor beam, whatever you want to call it. And that is huge news. Now, will it show up on CNN? Probably not, because that will mean it's been designed, pun intended, to fly under the radar. It's only intended for a certain audience and not for everybody, which is the same stupid games they've been playing for the last thousands of years. I'm hoping that whoever's behind this is it. This is the end of that kind of game playing, and it's going to create one hell of a show because that's the only thing that will appeal to people like your dearly beloved wife, obviously.
Well, yeah, and I mean that's good or bad. She's a rock. She is a rock. I hate to say a heavy mass object.
You know, they say that you sometimes play really tough rooms. Well, God, she has the toughest room on the planet.
Say, listen, Richard, I have another question.
Okay.
Just don't take it wrong. Richard, have you ever withheld important information from the people who are trying to find out the truth?
Of course.
You have?
Yeah, of course.
And what is that an okay thing
criteria?
to do? Pardon?
Do you want to know my criteria?
Yes.
When I'm uncertain. Why get everybody excited about something when the numbers don't pan out and you're uncertain yourself as to whether it's going to happen or not? If I wasn't really kind of confident that this is going to happen, I wouldn't have opened my mouth. I understand exactly what credibility is and what I'm putting myself in line for in terms of criticism. But to me, the bigger picture is people need to be aware of what could happen, because if it happened without blowing the whistle on it, an awful lot of honest people will freak out and people could get killed by stupidity on the part of their neighbors. And the key thing here is, A, it ain't going to hit the Earth. B, hitting the moon does not mean anything significant for the Earth except some extraordinary lighting effects and tiny micrometeorite impacts on the Earth's atmosphere 3 days later that are going to be really amazing to watch and to tell your grandkids about.
Now, I have a question about that. Trajectory-wise, that asteroid is moving from Earth toward the moon, right? So if it impacts, that debris is actually going to carry away from the moon?
Oh, yeah. Most of it will
so
escape.
Away from the Earth, though, too, right?
No, because if it impacts anywhere on the side of the moon facing the Earth, the impact fountains up opposite the trajectory of the impacting object. Think of it as an explosion. If you have an explosion on the Earth side of the moon, the objective is going to fountain up heading back toward the Earth.
I got that. I see that.
And 3 days later, under gravity, and think of Apollo, it will impact the Earth's atmosphere. And there's 6 cubic miles, more or less, of it to come and rain all over the world. It won't come in one bunch. It'll spread out. So basically, all over the planet, even on the other side, even on the side not facing the moon, 3 days later, there will be meteors coming in. But of course, that's the day side, so you won't see them because there'll be lots of them, but they'll be very tiny, so they won't be overwhelmingly blinding and brilliant. Now, there will be some big chunks, and those will be incredibly spectacular, and some of those may actually reach the surface. But we will have radar tracks on those days in advance. And so if there's a potential that they might fall somewhere near where there's people, those people will be able to get out of the way. They'll be warned. And we're not talking anything big enough to cause, like taking out city blocks or stuff like that. We're talking like meteors that will come through, like the one that came through a house in Atlanta 30, 40 years ago, bounced down through the attic and hit a woman lying on the couch on her hip. And she picked up this smoking rock in her living room, and she had a bruise on her hip. Talking about terrestrial effects on the surface, maybe.
Right, I was going to ask. Is this gonna, if it strikes, if it hits, will it make a crater like us astronomers have never seen, or is it going to be like a Tycho, or what? What do you think?
Oh, no. Tycho is 60 miles across.
Right, Tycho's huge.
It's huge, yes. No, the maximum size, and I may be overestimating because I'm trying to be conservative in terms of the debris, the ejecta coming out. The maximum size would be maybe 5, 6 miles. It's more likely going to be in the 2 or 3 mile range, which means with a telescope, you won't even be able to see it from the Earth. Although it will be brilliantly hot and glowing, and there'll be a fire fountain of material coming out, which is why you want both wide-angle lensing and close-ups with telescopes and binoculars and TV cameras, so you can record the details close-up, and then the wide angle will see the ejecta as a curtain rising up over the limb of the moon and, against black space lit by the sun, and begin to curve around and start heading toward Earth 3 days later, which is 11/11/11.
That's also the day Virgo gives. That's also the day Virgo gives birth to Saturn.
Which is another part of the symbology.
It is. 11/11/11 is when Saturn gets born from Virgo.
There are so many symbolic hooks on this that, by the way, 11/11/11 is the day when Elenine is in direct line with the Earth, Mercury, and Venus. Now, I was sitting here measuring with our torsion field detector the alignments as Elenine left us moving across the Earth's orbit, heading toward the outer solar system again in the last several weeks. And exactly on the night of October 28th, as Elenine was in a 60-degree angle with Jupiter and a 120-degree angle with the Sun, measured from the Earth, which is a trine and a sextile in astrology, but it's a critical, important set of angles in the hyperdimensional physics. I got the biggest reading, the biggest blip. It raised the accutron by 5 hertz for almost 50 seconds. The biggest reading I've had without any amplifier around, like Tikal or Stonehenge or Teotihuacan, since we came back from Stonehenge in August. So I can show you that Elenine is an active hyperdimensional source. It's interacting with the solar system, so don't tell me it could not have reached out and tweaked the trajectory of YU55, because I've got readings showing it's very much alive, whatever that means in the physics.
Right, and my opinion is as terrible or good. I mean, I think my amateur thoughts are good on the subject because I don't come with any predisposed notions or whatever. But I can miss the mark with my assumptions. I just remember when I was looking at it when it was occurring a little after 9/11, there was an alignment that. Lenin was, if it was to be very bright and robust, but then you say it's on a totally different level. When I say bright and robust, I'm not seeing it in the same torsion field, hyperdimensional, vision that you have of it. It's like looking at the comet Lenin through 2 different filters. I'm looking at it through my filter, and I'm seeing this thing and imagining this scenario, and then you're having, and I'll tell the listeners.
Let me give you an analogy.
Richard's a lot smarter than I am, everyone. So
it has nothing to do with smart. It has to do with just very simple thinking. Follow what I'm going to say. In 1942, I think, in February, Enrico Fermi and a bunch of physicists conducted the first nuclear pile experiment under a squash court in Chicago at the University of Chicago. Nobody knew about it. It was super top secret. There were FBI guys standing all around making sure with guns nobody came in, and they put in the rods, they quenched the reaction, they started writing notes, and it was not made public for decades that in fact happened under that squash court. The fact that nobody on Earth knew what had happened had nothing to do with the fact that event changed the course of history of the 20th century, led to the bombing of Japan, the saving of 1 million American lives at the end of World War II, the beginning of the Cold War, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the death of John Kennedy. You see where I'm going? Just because people don't know something's happened doesn't mean it hasn't happened, and it doesn't incredibly, radically affect their lives. This could be that kind of event where we're not going to know the impact for maybe a year or 10 years, whatever. Still doesn't make it go away.
That's true. That's true. It's everyone's going to come to the discussion with a different viewpoint. We're trying to show people what's the best way to know what's going on, to think about it, and have information from folks like Richard who know from his experience more than I do. And that's why I talk to Richard. And I think it's important for everyone to listen. Now, Richard, we're going to go to a station break because we went the whole hour without doing a station break. And then are you holding on with me?
Let me see if I can stay with you till the top of the hour. I need to find out at the other end of this complex whether my folks have arrived. Okay, so don't go away. I won't go away. I'll be back, and I'll let you know.
All Hit Radio.
All right, you're listening to All Hit Radio, and it's 53 degrees. Right now on our All Request line, I've got Mike Ledgerwood on the phone. Hey, babe, what would you like to hear?
We are observing your Earth.
Listen, Mike, I'm sorry, babe, but we can't...
And we'd like to make...
I'm sorry, Mike, there's...
a contact with you.
Collision course. On Revolution Radio.
We're about to begin a journey through the cosmos. We'll encounter galaxies and suns and planets, how the cosmos has shaped our evolution. We are a way for the cosmos to know itself.
Lighten up, Francis.
Lighten up, Francis. Richard, are you still there?
I'm here. You got me to the top of the hour, then I got to go because they're here.
Okay, let me ask you two quick questions from the listeners in the chat room.
Okay.
Is there possibility of microorganisms on asteroid YU55?
Yes, although I don't think it's an asteroid. I'm telling you, in the latest imagery, which I will post on my Facebook page sometime after this meeting, the damn thing looks like a ship. It looks technological. Does not look like any asteroid I've ever seen.
Okay, here's another question, because I know we only got a couple minutes. In Richard's opinion, what would be the implication?
Hello?
Pardon? Hello?
I'm saying, but if it's a ship, it could be loaded with biology inside.
Oh, I got you. I'm sorry, Richard. But yes, so that's why this question says, what if the asteroid stops?
Oh, well, then we're in a whole new universe. Everybody pray to whatever gods you pray that it does exactly that, because then disclosure is officially here, and even your wife will say, oh, my God, look at that.
She'll have to then. She will have to then. You know, honestly, my opinion of the civilizations, the extraterrestrial civilizations, they scare me a little bit because I don't know if we will even comprehend the level of different civilizations that there could be and how much danger we are really in if there's, I've never felt good about an alien interaction, Richard.
That's a whole other show.
Yeah.
That's a whole other show. Yeah.
Listen, it's 9 p.m. on the East Coast. It's 7 p.m. Where you are, right, Richard?
Yep.
That's
and
the
I'm
top
gonna
of the
sign
hour.
off. We've got a weekend and then 2 days. Stay tuned, stay focused, stay calm, and by all means, please, if this thing goes down the way our numbers say, enjoy it. You will only be seeing the beginning of a stunning paradigm change if this goes off as I think it has been planned.
Well, you make it sound amazing. Like most of these events that are going to or possibly happen outside of the norm, they are all amazing, and we just in a wait and see kind of issue. And listen, if I can convince my wife to go to your to go watch it, I'm gonna send you an email later about that. Okay?
We have a guest room.
That'd be wonderful. Richard,
Okay.
I want to thank you, and from the listeners, I know that they appreciate you coming and telling us what's going on because Revolution Radio does have some really great listeners, and the Internet's a really big place, so I'm glad you found me, and I'm glad I found you.
Likewise. Take care, my friend, and we'll be in touch.
Yes, we will, Richard. Talk to you soon.
All right, we do have another caller on the line, Francis.
Okay, I do want to, before we get to the callers, I want to go ahead and just finish off this portion with Richard. callers. I didn't take callers with Richard because, one, I only thought I was going to get a half an hour. Then he ended up going another half an hour. And I really, inside me, I feel like what he said, what he's got to say is important, and we need to hear it and observe it so that in future events we can put the information in its proper place for our future searches. Because I'm going to tell you, if I know anything, there is going to be a future of searching for things in space, and we're going to just have to ride with it. And I feel like this type of conversation is leading me more toward the research that's going to give us, in the end, a reasonable expectation of what's going on. I think the reasonable expectation of what's going to happen with YU55 is to expect nothing. Don't expect too much, and you won't be disappointed. That's what my mother always told me. Okay? So that's how I'm playing this game. And if I had to be honest with you, my opinion is it's going to follow its trajectory. I'm going to put the coordinates in my telescope, and my telescope's going to find it on November 8th, which is going to tell me that the coordinates are the same as they've always been and not altered. If it's Hijacker on the phone, we all know what I'm going to do with Hijacker when he calls, so don't worry about it.